Hello, my name is Daniel. Thank you for being here with me today. If you enjoy real, heartbreaking, cheating stories from Reddit, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment to share your thoughts. It really means a lot to me. This is a story that's been haunting me ever since I read it. It's not just about money, careers, or pride. It's about how fragile love can be when insecurity takes root. The story comes from a woman named Elena, who is now 33 years old and living in Raleigh, North Carolina. She met her boyfriend David, now 34, more than a decade ago when they were both juniors in college. Back then they sat side by side in an English literature class, reading poetry and novels, dreaming about the future. Their relationship grew strong, and for 10 long years they built their lives together, assuming they'd always be on the same team. David studied information technology and pursued a career in cybersecurity. Elena stayed in the liberal arts track and after graduation worked in the nonprofit world. She once thought she wanted to be a school teacher, but later realized it wasn't her path. Her career wasn't straightforward. She moved from nonprofits to small organizations, slowly learning skills that would eventually carry her into the corporate world. Through it all, she never expected to out-earn David. In fact, she always assumed he would make more, and whenever he did, she insisted they split expenses evenly so resentment would never creep in. It was her way of protecting their relationship, of making sure money never became a wedge between them. But life has a way of shifting when we least expect it. Elena recently accepted a consulting job, one that paid far more than she ever dreamed possible. When she received the offer, she was stunned. She told David that the pay was incredible, though she didn't share the exact number. She didn't want to brag, and she worried it might create tension. Soon after, the truth came out. They were applying for a new apartment and had to submit their pay stubs. That's when David discovered Elena now made about 30% more than he did. She thought he would be proud. He always claimed to be a feminist, always told her he supported her ambitions. But instead of celebrating her success, he started making cruel jokes. David said she had cheated the system. He told her no English literature major should ever make more than a cybersecurity professional unless they had somehow tricked their way up the ladder. He dismissed her achievements, pointing out that her very first job after college came from a referral through a sorority friend. To him, that meant she had relied on nepotism, trampling over others who were more deserving. But that job paid only $22,000 a year. It wasn't some golden opportunity, it was survival. He even mocked the promotion she had earned at her first corporate job, where she had volunteered to create and lead a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. Elena admitted that if she had been a white man, she probably wouldn't have been chosen for that role. But instead of seeing it as initiative and courage, David twisted it into proof she hadn't earned her place. He reminded her that she'd once been awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, a scholarship not offered to men. To him, this was more evidence that she had an unfair advantage. But for Elena, these comments cut deep. She had grown up in a blue-collar family. She had worked full-time while going to school full-time, scraping by to afford her degree. Every step she took had been filled with sacrifice and effort. To hear the man she loved accuse her of dishonesty was heartbreaking. The breaking point came one evening. David made a remark about the first woman recently hired onto his team, saying she was obviously just a diversity hire. Elena couldn't take it anymore. She told him his jokes weren't funny, that they didn't sound like harmless guy talk, but like the bitter words of a little insecure boy. David didn't take it well. He snapped back, calling her a naive Karen. Since that night, they've barely spoken. Elena found herself questioning not just the argument, but the very foundation of their relationship. How could a man who claimed to respect women belittle her every achievement? How could a partner of 10 years look at her not with pride, but with resentment? And that's where her story paused. Not with a breakup, not with reconciliation, but with the heavy question so many of us face. What do you do when love begins to feel like a burden instead of a home? Elena's story had left a heavy feeling, but the next one I read carried a different kind of grief, one not tied to career or jealousy, but to memory, love, and loss. This one came from Michael, Elena's older brother, who is now 36 years old. Michael's life had already been marked by tragedy. His wife, Rachel, passed away from breast cancer 3 years earlier. They hadn't had much money, but they had managed, through years of saving, to buy their first decent car together. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs, and it carried pieces of Rachel's spirit everywhere it went. She had been the one who chose it, and Michael made sure it was always maintained. Inside, hanging from the rear-view mirror, was a simple necklace Rachel used to wear. To anyone else, it was just a cheap trinket, but to Michael, it was sacred, a reminder of the woman he had loved and lost. That's why the night of his younger brother's engagement dinner became unbearable. His brother, David, had just gotten engaged to a woman named Melissa, and while the family gathered to celebrate, Michael kept mostly quiet. He'd always thought Melissa was harsh, the kind of person who disguised cruelty as honesty, and that night her sharpness cut him deeper than ever. When the party ended, one cousin left early, and his brother didn't want to spend money on an Uber. Instead, David asked Michael for a ride. Michael agreed, even though his mother was already in the passenger seat. But before they could leave, Melissa stood outside the car and sneered, refusing to step inside. She said, "I'm not riding in this piece of junk on my engagement night." The words pierced Michael like a knife. That car wasn't just metal and wheels, it was Rachel's memory, a symbol of their struggles and their love. His mother tensed at the remark, visibly hurt for him, but stayed silent. After 5 minutes of coaxing from David, Melissa reluctantly got in the back seat. Yet her insults didn't stop. She muttered constantly about how dirty and ugly the car was, calling it a piece of junk again and again, as if she wanted to break him down. David said nothing, and that silence burned even more than her words. Finally, Michael caught her eyes in the rearview mirror and told her flatly, if she called his car a piece of junk one more time, she'd be out. He didn't care if it meant dropping her in the middle of nowhere. Melissa grew quiet for a moment, but the peace didn't last. She soon spotted the necklace dangling from the mirror. With a mocking laugh, she said it was ugly, asking why anyone would hang such cheap trash in an already awful car. Michael's chest tightened. That necklace was Rachel's. That necklace was the last piece of her he carried with him every day. His grief and rage collided. He slammed the brakes, pulled the car over, and told her to shut up and get out. David was shocked, asking if he was serious, while their mother begged him to just keep driving. But Michael couldn't. He told Melissa again to leave, and when she refused, he got out, opened her door, and demanded she step out. She started to cry, but by then he was too furious to care. David called him insane, but Michael ordered them both out. Finally, they left the car, standing on the sidewalk under the night sky. He drove away with his mother still beside him, shouting that he couldn't abandon them like that. Michael exploded, yelling at her to stay out of it, or she'd join them. The fallout was brutal. His mother told the rest of the family, and his father was furious. He called Michael disgraceful, accused him of ruining his brother's engagement night, and said he needed serious help for his anger. He told Michael he should have just swallowed his pride until he got home. Michael couldn't take it. He walked out mid-argument, leaving his father fuming alone. Later, Michael reflected on what had happened. He knew Melissa hadn't realized the necklace belonged to Rachel, but that didn't make her cruelty any easier to bear. Her words weren't simple honesty, they were calculated jabs meant to humiliate him. And David's silence, his refusal to defend his brother, made the betrayal even sharper. When Michael shared his story online, strangers were quick to weigh in. Many told him he had every right to defend his late wife's memory. They said Melissa wasn't brutally honest, but simply cruel, hiding behind excuses. They reminded him that families should protect the legacies of loved ones, not trample them. One person wrote that maybe the car really was old, and maybe the necklace was cheap, but to Michael, they were priceless, and anyone who disrespected that didn't deserve his patience. For Michael, it wasn't about being right or wrong that night. It was about Rachel, about holding on to the small things that reminded him of her in a world that had already taken her away. And if defending that meant being seen as the villain, then so be it. Because love, once lost, doesn't vanish. It lingers in objects, in memories, in the quiet hum of an old car driving down Raleigh's roads, still carrying her with him no matter what anyone else said. The fallout after Melissa's cruelty toward Michael still weighed heavily on the family, but pain seemed to follow them in smaller ways too, slipping quietly into moments that should have been simple. One spring, when travel restrictions had finally lifted, Michael's younger sister, Elena, now 34, agreed to spend a few days visiting her mother-in-law in Virginia. Her husband, Ryan, 32, joined her along with Ryan's parents, who adored Elena. For a brief time, there was laughter again, shared meals, walks through blooming gardens, and the fragile hope that maybe things could feel normal. But grief has a way of cracking even ordinary days. When it came time to leave, the family began loading Elena and Ryan's truck. Elena and her mother-in-law were in the back, trying to arrange the luggage in the bed. At first, it was ordinary. One person tilting a suitcase, the other shifting bags to make room. But something small, almost invisible, shifted. Elena bristled when her mother-in-law corrected her, showing her a better angle. To Elena, it felt like a familiar sting, the same suffocating tone she had endured her whole childhood, always being told what to do, always treated as though she wasn't capable on her own. She snapped, her voice sharp. "I don't need your help, I can figure it out." Her mother-in-law froze, wounded. With a heavy sigh, she lifted her hands and walked back inside the house without a word. Silence filled the driveway as Ryan and his parents finished loading the truck. Elena kept her eyes down, her chest tight with the mix of anger and guilt that always followed moments like this. On the road to their next destination, the quiet stretched. Eventually, Elena broke it. She started venting about her mother, her words quick and heavy, filled with years of unspoken resentment. She didn't just want to complain, she wanted someone to understand. Ryan's father gave the safest answer he could. "That's between you and your mom. I'm not getting involved." His voice was calm, practiced, like someone who had learned long ago when to step back. But Ryan, uneasy, tried to explain away the tension. "You think your mom was just trying to help," he said gently. His own mother, sitting beside him, nodded and added, "I agree, you might have been a bit harsh with her." The words landed like stones in Elena's chest. She turned toward the window, her jaw tightening. The car filled with silence again. But this silence felt different, heavier, suffocating, a silence that spoke louder than any argument. Later, Ryan wondered if he'd done the wrong thing. He hadn't meant to gang up on Elena, but that's how it felt to her. 3 voices against 1. All she had wanted was someone to listen, to hold space for the years of hurt she carried. Instead, she had been dismissed as unreasonable, as childish, when all she needed was understanding. Strangers online who read the story were blunt. Some pointed out that Elena wasn't looking for judgment, just empathy. Others said Ryan should have stayed quiet, like his father had, or saved his perspective for a private moment instead of correcting her in front of both parents. A few noted that what happened in the driveway wasn't about suitcases at all. It was about a lifetime of tension between a mother and daughter, where even small gestures reopened old wounds. To those who didn't grow up in that kind of household, Elena's reaction might have seemed petty, but to anyone who had, it was the final straw in years of being made to feel small. Ryan began to realize that what Elena needed most wasn't someone to solve the argument or assign blame. She needed to feel heard, to know that the people closest to her could understand the depth of her scars, even when the fight seemed trivial on the surface. But in that car, on that long drive through winding highways, she had sat alone with her anger. And Ryan, though sitting beside her, had made her feel even more alone. In the months that followed, Elena pulled away in subtle ways. Her voice softened when she spoke to Ryan's parents, careful and polite, but her laughter didn't reach her eyes. With Ryan, she avoided certain conversations altogether, fearful of being dismissed again. The gap between them widened, quiet but undeniable. For Ryan, the regret lingered. He replayed that car ride in his mind countless times, wishing he had simply taken her hand, told her he understood, told her she wasn't overreacting. But regret is heavy, and it does not rewrite memory. What seemed like a simple family trip had turned into another fracture, another reminder that grief and resentment don't disappear with time. They wait, buried beneath the surface, until the smallest spark brings them back to life. And for Elena, whose life had already been marked by loss, even the smallest spark could feel like fire. February of 2019 was supposed to be special. Alex and I had been talking for weeks about escaping our routines with a trip to Disneyland. I had imagined the two of us walking hand in hand through the park, laughing at silly rides, watching fireworks explode above us, and feeling like kids again. But before our plans were set, Alex asked if I would be all right if some of his friends tagged along. I hesitated, but he looked so hopeful, and I didn't want to be the one who spoiled his excitement. So I said yes. What started as our weekend of magic turned into a crowded group outing of 14. 6 of them were his core circle, 4 men who were closest to him, and 2 girlfriends who mostly stayed silent at their sides. I should have known things would not unfold the way I imagined. His friends were not interested in the rides, or the shows, or even the simple joy of walking through the park. All they wanted was food, restaurant after restaurant, snack after snack, until the day blurred into nothing but greasy wrappers and heavy meals. I don't care much for theme park food, no matter how good it might taste in the moment. It's overpriced, indulgent, and leaves me feeling sluggish. The other women in the group didn't seem too thrilled either, but they went along with it, eating in quiet compliance beside their partners. I had hoped Alex and I could slip away, find our own little adventure, but every time I suggested it, his friends would guilt him into staying. He gave in every time. By the end of the trip, I felt invisible. That weekend was supposed to be for us, but it turned into a performance where my voice no longer mattered. Months passed, but the memory still lingered like a bitter taste. This past weekend, the so-called Disney Six gathered at our apartment. It was casual at first, laughter over drinks, stories circling the room. Then Alex mentioned we were planning a little getaway at the end of the summer. My heart lifted at the thought of it being just the 2 of us, a chance to reclaim something that had been lost. But before I could speak, one of his friends chimed in eagerly, saying he would love to join. The others followed quickly, piling on their own enthusiasm, as if our private trip had always been open to them. I opened my mouth, ready to gently explain that it was meant to be a couples retreat, but Alex cut me off with a smile and said, "Sure, sounds great." The air shifted inside me. I felt myself harden.
I could not let this happen again. So I told them the truth. I said I would prefer if they didn't come, that our priorities on vacation were not the same. His closest friend leaned forward, eyes narrowing, and asked why. I reminded him of Disneyland, how they spent the entire time eating while Alex and I wanted something different. And then, out of frustration, I used a word I should not have. I said being gluttonous was not how I wanted to spend a trip. The room went silent. Faces stiffened. His friends exchanged glances, and the weight of my words hung like a heavy curtain no one dared to pull aside. The rest of the evening was uncomfortable. Small talk faltered. When they finally left, the apartment felt emptier than before, though the tension remained thick between Alex and me. He turned to me with disappointment in his eyes, called me a diva, said I was out of line. I wanted to scream that it was not about food, not about insulting anyone, but about feeling ignored, erased, unimportant. I wanted him to understand that all I craved was a piece of time where we could just be us. But the words caught in my throat, tangled with shame over the bluntness of what I had said. The saddest part is that I know I was right to want what I wanted. A couple's getaway should not need defending. Yet the way it came out, sharp, final, may have broken something beyond repair. His friends now see me as judgmental. Alex sees me as difficult, and I am left wondering how something as simple as wanting to hold on to a little piece of love turned into a wedge that keeps pushing us further apart. It's strange how quickly dreams dissolve. Disneyland was supposed to be a memory we cherished. Instead, it became a symbol of how easily I am sidelined, and now even the hope of a quiet summer retreat feels poisoned. I don't know if Alex and I will ever find our way back to each other. What I do know is that the silence between us grows heavier with each passing day, and I am terrified that one day soon it will be the only thing left. The truth was that everything could have been handled with more care. Elena knew her words had been harsh, but the sting of the moment stayed with her long after the trip was over. The comments people made later about her being too blunt, about her lacking compassion, only deepened the ache inside her. She had only wanted to spend time with Matthew, away from the noise of obligations and other people's expectations. Instead, what was meant to be a private escape became a stage for conflict, judgment, and disappointment. She kept replaying that moment in her head, wondering if she could have chosen gentler words or held back her frustration. Yet, at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Friends should not invite themselves into something they were never meant to be a part of. They knew Matthew struggled to say no, and they took advantage of it. Elena had been the only one willing to speak up, and for that she was painted as cruel. The loneliness of being misunderstood clung to her like a shadow. What hurt most was how easily others dismissed her. People reduced her feelings to rudeness, ignoring the deeper wound of being silenced and cornered. All she had wanted was to protect a small piece of happiness with someone she loved, but instead of preserving their peace, she ended up feeling like an intruder in her own relationship. Matthew's silence, his reluctance to defend her, cut her in ways no outsider's words ever could. It left her wondering if love meant always swallowing your pain so others wouldn't think less of you. In the end, Elena learned that sometimes doing the right thing will not make you look kind or gentle in the eyes of others. Sometimes protecting your own needs means being labeled as harsh, even when your heart is breaking. She wished she could go back and explain herself better, but life does not allow rewrites. All that remained was the hollow ache of a getaway that was never really theirs, and a love that felt more fragile than ever. Stories like Elena's echo in the real world more often than we realize. Many people find themselves in situations where boundaries are crossed, yet when they finally speak up, they are blamed for being too direct or too cold. It's a painful cycle. You're pushed into a corner, you react, and then you're judged more harshly than the ones who overstepped in the first place. This is how emotional exhaustion builds, and how relationships can quietly erode. If you've ever been in a toxic dynamic like this, one of the most important lessons is learning to set boundaries early and firmly. When people invite themselves into your life without respect, it's not your job to carry their disappointment when you say no. A kind but clear refusal is not cruelty, it's self-protection. It's also crucial to pay attention to how your partner responds. Do they stand with you when you are treated unfairly, or do they leave you to face the weight alone? That answer often reveals more about the strength of the relationship than any argument could ever. Moving forward after emotional hurt requires patience with yourself. It's easy to drown in guilt over words spoken in frustration, but healing means acknowledging your pain without punishing yourself endlessly. Practice honest communication before resentment has a chance to build. Protect your joy, even if others call it selfish. And above all, remember that respect should never be begged for. It should be freely given by those who truly value you.